Hey, welcome to the Cam Otis Show. On this episode, Michael Tanner, Vietnam. Oh my God, are you that old? No, you're not that old.
I am
Where,
not.
where did?
I'm not. No.
Well, you know what? You know what? I'm sorry. Here I go with another intro that's going to last a long time because I'm going down the road. I watched Full Metal Jacket just a couple of days ago, and I know
Oh, what
you're
an
a
awesome movie.
Marine. I know you're a
Awesome movie.
Marine, and my mind went Marine, Vietnam. I mean, why not, right? Hey,
Of course. Yes. Yes. All my
yeah,
heroes were there. Yes.
Michael, man, great to have you on the show. Appreciate your patience with us today, or really just with me, because I'm the one who's all over the map apparently today. Great
Hey
to
man,
have you, man.
I am thrilled to be here and to chat with both of you guys. And really it's an honor for me to serve you and your audience any way I can.
So I got to know, and this is always my fun answer because or question because you dive into somebody's background, and you see
Mhm.
Marine rifleman. Okay, yeah, that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah.
There's no better
Yeah.
education in the world than Marine boot camp. I know.
That's a
I've heard
pretty
of them all.
expensive education. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. But then you went into the corporate world, and now you got your own business. You're coaching. What happened? Why'd you go from, I mean, Marine to corporate? Okay, makes sense. But
Yeah.
corporate to doing what you're doing now, your
Yeah.
own business. What's going on there, man? How'd that happen?
Well, I think probably, Otis, first thing I should be a little transparent and say why I got into the Marine Corps to start with. I wish it was a super patriotic story about I just wanted to serve my country and so forth. The reality is, my first attempt at college after high school, I was invited to leave college. And that was because I wasn't mature enough or disciplined enough for the studies and so forth. And the naive person in me, and then having some family members and all that that were in the Marine Corps during Vietnam, have you? I just said, you know what better place to learn discipline and maturity than the Marine Corps? So that's what took me into the Marine Corps, and that's where I started learning leadership. But to your point of now transitioning from the corporate world to doing my own business in leadership development, I think it's really around a passion of mine to see people win, in particular, see teams win. And I think I know you guys, you have this saying, I think I saw it on your website around you thrive on people's success. And I feel the exact same way. I mean, it just gets me up in the morning when I know I can work with someone and see them succeed in some way, however they define success or their team defines success. I just so enjoy teaching leadership and enabling, equipping that success for a team. Now I know I can do that in the corporate world, right? The teams that I led throughout the years in the corporate world, I could lead them well. I could lead them to success. I could see them win and so forth. But you just don't get that multiplying effect that you can when you're in your own business working with literally anyone that wants to work with you. In the corporate world, I was somewhat limited to, well, I can only see that in the teams that I'm leading. But when you have your own business, now you can multiply that into literally anyone that would want to work with you. And then there's this little piece of me too that I've always feared the day that the corporate world would tell me that I couldn't lead the way I wanted to lead. Right when the bureaucratic machine, kind of cover your butt machine in the corporate world would tell me, no, 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 you can't do that as a leader. I just feared when that might happen, and for that reason, I wanted to make the transition into running my own ship, if you will.
That's a great point because I was just thinking about it reminds me of Game Changer, the book Game Changer by Rob Angel, the guy who invented just had Pictionary, invented
Yes.
Pictionary.
Yeah.
And what drove him was his dad getting laid off. And he said, I don't want to be in that situation
Right.
where I've got this job and all of a sudden somebody else controls, the purse strings, if you will,
Yeah.
and pulls the purse strings. And that was really what got his mind thinking that way. So it's interesting that you're following that same path. Maybe you've got a game in your future. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe I'll change it. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, with that, Mike, you mentioned a lot of great reasons for, what pushed you away from the corporate world.
Mhm.
But what pushed you off that diving board, though? Like, what was that moment? You were talking about the worry that the bureaucratic machine was going to, cramp your
Mhm.
style a little bit. Did it start to happen? You're like, oh no, I'm getting ahead of this, or what was that final push?
It did start to happen a little bit. Now, I'm not going to paint some picture that I was grossly persecuted as a leader in the corporate world. I'm not against the corporate world at all. But it did start to happen a little bit. I'll give you a for instance. So I had a team member that, especially over one weekend, had just gone incredibly above and beyond with some visitors that were coming in from a different country. And they were going to be in the weekend before a big conference. And this team member, I mean, he really went above and beyond. I'm in the Atlanta, Georgia area, and he spent that weekend. He and his wife spent that weekend with the visitors that had came into town. They went to the aquarium. They did several things over the weekend. And
Y'all got a nice aquarium too.
Yeah, exactly. We do. And I just thought that was phenomenal that he completely took that on his own to be such a great host to our visitors that were coming in the weekend before the big conference. And so I reached out to, and he had taken his wife along with him, right? So I reached out to HR and asked for his mailing address because I wanted to write a thank you card and mail it to his wife. Well, the response I got from HR is, well, we can't give out people's mailing address because, they may not want people to know where I was communicating with HR over Teams, right? So I was texting back and forth quickly. And so I just went to Google and searched the guy's name. And in 10 seconds, I had his email address or his address, mailing address. And so I just told the HR lady, well, here's his address. You won't tell it to me, but Google will. Therefore, I'm going to write this thank you note and I'm going to mail it to them. So it's small things like that I saw happening. And, I just don't want leadership to be hindered in that way. And so that's just one example of, it's time to move on.
When those leadership moments, the small ones, are the ones where you want to be able to have that flexibility, especially because those
Absolutely.
little things are what makes the lasting change in your team.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's those kind of things that tells the story to my team that I'm leading, that I'm a selfless leader, that I care about them, that I'm building relationships with them. I mean, who writes a thank you card to your spouse? You'd better know that he came in, the day after receiving that and said, hey man, I really appreciate you sending that card to my wife. It meant a lot to her. We were just having some fun over the weekend with these guys, but man, it really meant a lot to her that you, right. And that was huge in building a good relationship with that team member, and rightly so, expressing the thanks that he deserved. He and his wife both deserve for going above and beyond the way they did.
How do you grow, that leadership cycle with folks now? I mean, obviously, I think I'm going to guess about 20 years in the corporate world. Is that about right?
Yes, actually, I always tell people my first professional leadership development position was actually in the Marine Corps in 1993. So I've been in some type of leadership for 28 years. I probably shouldn't do the math here live, but I think that's 28 years or so I've been in some type of leadership position.
Yeah. So what I'm curious about in this instance is, what's that leadership thing that you see across the board with your clients? And we'll get to the foundational stuff later.
Mm-hmm.
That is like, almost the thing that you go to because everybody has that gap in their leadership skills or development. What's that thing?
Yeah, I think probably the biggest thing that that I attack first when I'm looking at gaps in people's leadership is this idea that leadership is about relationship. I think too many people view leadership as a title or a position or some type of authority or something like that. And I just don't define leadership that way, right? For me, leadership's not a destination. You don't achieve a title. I'm the vice president of sales. That doesn't suddenly mean that you are a leader. And instead, what I teach is that really leadership is about relationship. What level of relationship can you build with those individuals that you're influencing? Now, I will say that I used to believe that I would go into an organization or I would consult with an individual and I would start with, let's measure your leadership and then let's improve your leadership. Now I've realized that I first have to help people define leadership. So we define it, then we measure it, and then we improve it. And relationship is always one of those things that we're having to try to teach and help people to improve their relationships. You've seen this before, I'm certain. You have a team of people, and one of those people on that team is deemed the leader. They have a title, they have a position, they have some sort of authority, right? So they are the quote leader of that team. But yet then you have another individual has no title on that in that group of people on that team, and everyone respects that person. Everyone admires that person. When that person suggests the team does something, you better believe the team is going to do that. That person doesn't have a title, but that person is certainly a leader in that team. And it's likely attributed to the relationship then that person has with all those other team members.
What that makes me think of the relationship piece, because I really think you're hitting on something there, is, I use this a lot, and I'm going to pick on my younger kids for rugby because I feel bad when I pick on these really basic things for the college kids because they're great and all, but it's like, you make stupid mistakes still. But, I have this phrase I use a lot where it's you have big talk and you have small talk when you're out on the rugby field. And I think it's a very similar type of thing for business that, you have the big talk to, get the rugby specific stuff. It's like, defensive line here, we're going that way, do this, the really, really big stuff that everyone needs to hear. But the most important stuff that happens on it, because that's a designated leader, going into the more business example, that's the person with the title that's saying, we are going this way, we are doing this. Mm-hmm. And then the people who really drive the team forward are really, the equivalent of the relationship people who do the small talk, where it's just like, hey, Michael, over here. Hey, Michael, you got that guy? Cool. I got this guy. Mm-hmm. And just all those little tiny things that actually makes that big talk really hit at every level and get everyone on the same page and get working. And you start building those relationships. And that's the reason I'm loving the small talk to the relationship mm-hmm. thing. Because I always tell people, like, as a coach, I should tell you to shut up. Because it should be so casual that you're just talking to the guy next to you mm-hmm. that it should get annoying to me that you're talking about too much or you're talking too often. Like mm-hmm. that should be the extreme we're pushing towards here. But when you get the people who are willing to put up their hand for that small talk, those are real leaders around the team. And you need the person who can have the hat on and make the decisions and, direct the traffic and all of that. But you're not going to actually get anywhere if you don't have those small voices bringing everyone on the same page.
Yeah, Cam, I've listened to enough of your podcast episodes to know that you were going to bring up rugby at some point. I knew it, right? But here's look, I know a lot about sports. Rugby is not one of them. I know very little about rugby, but I know a lot about sports. But I completely agree with you that these relationships, leadership relationships, they're built in the really, really small activities, the really small task or the really small talk, as you're talking about. It's not built in these big, grand actions or gestures or some type of big, risky decision or something like that. The relationships are not built in that. And in fact, in all of our leadership teaching, we teach 4 components of leadership, and building out those 4 components, we teach you build them in really small steps. It's a really small talk, mm-hmm. as you're talking about, that builds those. And so, for instance, in relationship, one of the first things that I teach in leadership with building relationships is have a regular one-on-one meeting with each of your team members, each of your reports, right? And you need to be extremely consistent with that one-on-one meeting. You need to treat that one-on-one meeting as if it's immutable. It cannot change, right? You should never cancel your one-on-one meeting. You may have to reschedule it from time to time, but if at all possible, you schedule regular time with each of your team members and do not change it. And the very first agenda item in every single one of those meetings is, how are you doing? Tell me a little bit about you, right? It's just genuine curiosity about that team member as a person, not about what they're doing right now for the team or their performance or what their deliverable is. You're not there yet. The first agenda item is, I just want to know a little bit about you. It's a really small thing, but it starts to build that relationship just the way you're talking about with small talk.
So what are the other three then? If relationship is one of those four components, what are those other three? Come on, man.
Yeah.
So
The other
I had to ask you.
Yeah, the other three of this, and I'm not going to get all nerdy on you guys and with math and all, but I'm a math and computer science guy, and so I just needed an equation to be able to measure leadership, and so we teach 4 components of leadership, and those 4 variables that are in my equation are credibility. Credibility is it's your track record of success, right? It is some type of history that your team members believe, because they can see this track record, that you can lead them to success. The second variable is competence. That's the skill set and the knowledge that is necessary to lead the team to success. Now, competence, it's usually 2 parts. It's first of all, it's subject matter competence, right? So if you are now a new sales manager, well, you need to be competent. You need to have the knowledge and skill in sales, right? The subject matter, but you also need to have the competence in leadership ability as well, right? This is where we get the proverbial analogy of the rock star salesman that was promoted to sales manager, and now the sales team just falls apart. He was a superstar salesman, but he has no leadership abilities, and so the team just kind of falls apart. So competence is the second variable. The third variable, and again, I'm not going to get all nerdy in the math, but it's motive, and it's in the denominator of our leadership equation, meaning it's divided into all the other variables. But motive is essentially this: it's the question that all of your team members are asking of you and your leadership. Is your leadership selfish or selfless in nature, right? Are you making decisions in giving orders and so forth? Are you doing that out of a selfish motive or a selfless motive? And if your team is at a high level questioning that your motives might be selfish, well, then that's going to greatly reduce your leadership effectiveness score, right? Denominator. And then finally, the fourth variable is relationship that we talked about. And relationship, again, it's the level at which you have a relationship with team members as people. Not as team members, not as what they're doing for the team, but genuine curiosity about them as a person. But relationship is multiplied by against all of those other 3 variables, because a high level of relationship can help you overcome shortcomings in any of those other 3. If you have a really, really good relationship with someone, and maybe you ask that person to do a task that no one likes to do. Well, they may first start to question your motive. Well, why is he making me do that? Why is he angry at me? What did I do to him? But then their mind is going to quickly go to, well, wait a minute though. I've got a really, really good relationship with Otis, and I know he's got the best interest of the team at heart. And so I'm going to go and I'm going to give this task that he asked me to do all of my effort. And so you can see how that relationship, it even overcomes a questioning of the motives at times. So those are the 4: credibility, competence, motive, and relationship.
I think the interesting thing with the relationship there, we've talked about this a bunch on the show, but we're social creatures and we like to tell stories in our head, and we're always creating new stories. I think I used the example last week on a show of an employee showing up an hour late to work and doesn't text you at all. So you're immediately like, gosh, this scumbag, he's stealing money from, and you just spiral out on all this stuff. And it turns out that, his grandma's in the hospital and it's like, okay, gosh, but you start writing that story right away. And I think the interesting thing about the relationship is it kind of gives like a preface to the story that people are going to write themselves. That it's like, hey, I know who Otis really is. So instead of when he's late for work, because he's always late for work, that's a big problem here at Tribe of Purpose, is him showing up late. But when he's late for work, it's no longer oh gosh, he's probably stealing money, he's doing this, he's doing that. He probably had something else he had to do. He had to go take care of his family. I know he's a family man. I know he does this, all these different things. I know he's got a bad back. He could have been at the doctor and forgot to tell me. Like, you can put all this stuff together because you have that relationship. And so I think that's a really important thing there. And it's why that has such a big effect on those other three categories you mentioned.
Yeah, it's so true what you're saying there, Cam. I mean, we all talk about it, and conceptually we understand this idea of always assume the best of intent, right? And we get that. Conceptually we understand that, but we have to recognize that our minds don't naturally do that. Right. Yeah. And in fact, our mind naturally does the opposite. Right. There's this thing called fundamental attribution error. And basically what it comes down to is it says, if there is something wrong with you, then I assume it's a flaw in your character. But if there's something wrong with me, then I assume there's something wrong with my situation or my surroundings. Right. And so our mind naturally doesn't assume the best of intent. And it's relationship, in my opinion, that enables us to always assume the best of intent. And so if we've got a really, really good relationship with someone and they show up late, it's that relationship that enables us to say, yeah, but I know him really well. Something must be going on in his world or in his life that's made him late. We don't just automatically go to, yeah, he's just such a slacker and a loser that he showed up late.
So that's I love that formula, by the way. My engineering background goes, oh, that okay, very cool.
Yeah, I really nerd out on the math. I love it. Yes.
Yeah. I did that a little bit myself. I was visualizing the formula up on the whiteboard as you were describing.
Yes. Yep.
So how did you come up with this formula? What was the origin? I mean, bit of an engineer, that sort of thing, but a math formula for leadership.
Well, so I settled in on the 4 variables of that we teach in leadership: credibility, competence, motive, and relationship. I settled in on those variables really, really early in studying leadership. I know, Otis, you've got the military background as well as I do, and that most people assume that leadership in the military is all built around rank, right? You outrank me, you told me to do something, therefore I do it. And I don't deny that rank is there and it's important and so forth, but I'm sure you know this as well and felt this as well. The best of leaders, even inside of the military, were those servant leaders, those leaders that demonstrated for you that they care for you, that they were doing everything they could to even make your life better and simpler and easier and getting your job done easier. Simon Sinek wrote a great book, you've probably read it, entitled Leaders Eat Last. That's a leadership lesson I learned in the Marine Corps, is that if you're the leader, you're going to eat last. And why is that? It's because you care more about the well-being of your people than you do your own well-being. And if the food runs out, you're going to make sure that they got it, not you, right? That's that servant leadership nature. And so I just recognized really early on that those 4 components of leadership, credibility, competence, motive, and relationship were 4 variables that I was certainly going to teach in leadership. But then I kept running into this question of, well, how do I measure leadership? Right? How do I know if my leadership is being effective or not? And I just kept running into people using what I believe to be the wrong metrics of measuring leadership effectiveness. For instance, people were using attrition in their team as a measurement of leadership effectiveness. So if our attrition is really high and our people are leaving, well, our leadership must be bad. My problem with that analogy or that example is it's too late. That's like looking at the scoreboard at the end of the game and trying to change it, right? You can't change the scoreboard at the end of the game. If your good team members have already left, it's kind of too late to start to trying to change the game, changing your leadership. And so what I wanted to do is give a real-time method that I could right now measure my leadership, but also I wanted it to be objective, an objective measurement. Because when we receive criticism, something that feels like criticism, especially when that criticism is subjective, then we tend to get all defensive about it. But if I just give you a number, if I just say, look, right now, your leadership score is 142. Well, that's completely objective. You're like, okay, how do I make that number bigger? And then we can start working on ability. We can start working on competence and all this, and you can watch that number grow. And then you can see that. So that's the reason. And again, with the math background, I came up with the equation is just, I've got to be able to answer the question, how do you measure leadership? And how can I make it objective so that you won't get all defensive about it when I'm presenting it to you?
I want to throw this out to both of y'all because, I think it's pretty well believed, if that's the right way to put it, across the board that, you could teach leadership. Some people are naturally born leaders, but you can, of course, teach people how to lead. Dad, you've had the phrase that you say a lot, which is, there's no such thing as a servant leader because servant leaders are just leaders. And if you're not a servant leader, then you're not a leader. So what I'm thinking more is, so we can teach leadership, but can you teach the service aspect? Because some of that seems a little bit more internal, value-based morality. Like that seems like it's a little bit more personal. So Michael, I'll throw it over to you first. Do you think you can teach the service leadership aspect? And then maybe a little bit of how?
Yeah, no, I firmly believe you. I'm a complete believer that leadership is learned. It is a skill. It is a knowledge that is learned. I do acknowledge that some people can naturally be a leader a little better than others. I believe extroverts, for instance, leadership probably comes a little easier for an extrovert than it does an introvert, just because of the communication aspects and all that. But I don't believe in this idea of you're either a natural born leader or you're not. I just don't believe that. And this idea of having a servant attitude in your leadership, I do believe that you can develop that. And my best example of that is, so when I teach in my equation, I mentioned to you that one of the variables is motive, and it's associated to why do you want to be a leader? Why are you in leadership? Are your reasons selfish or selfless? Right. Well, occasionally, and I so admire this when someone does this, especially when it's in a group setting, occasionally someone will raise their hand and say, well, you know what? Come to think of it, I got into leadership for selfish reasons, right? I wanted the prestige, or I wanted the title, or I wanted the compensation, right? And so the next question, when they're willing to acknowledge that they're in leadership right now for selfish reasons, the next question is, well, how do I shift that over to selfless reasons, right? And I'm a big proponent of this idea. First, take the action, and then the feeling or the emotion will follow, right? And so in the analogy everyone uses here is exercise. None of us, well, very few of us, we get up really early in the morning and we just feel like exercising. Boy, I can't wait to go run or go lift or go whatever. But after we do it, we always feel better about having done it, right? We feel better about ourselves. And then you've got all the chemical things that are going on in your body that make you feel better and more energized and so forth. And so if you'll take the action first, then the feeling and the emotion will start to follow after that. And so, for instance, to help someone start to swing the pendulum from a selfish motive to a selfless motive, one of the first things that, again, remember we talked about the little actions. I teach people the first thing you should do is start to be intentional about recognizing when any of your team members are doing something good, going above and beyond, or they're doing it really well. And then you need to start taking the action of expressing your appreciation for those things that team member is doing. Just go to them one-on-one, just a quick pat on the back. Hey, I saw yesterday in that meeting, that idea you had, it was great. I really appreciate you sharing that idea with us. you take that action of expressing appreciation, and then the selfless motive will feeling and emotion of selfless motives will start to follow after that when you're consistent in taking those actions. So that's my answer to you. Just take the action necessary to be a servant leader, and the feeling or emotion or attitude of a servant leader will start to follow that.
That's a great way of looking at it. And there's so much truth to that. It's developing the habit, right? And the only way to develop a habit is you do something multiple times, whether it's a bad habit, whatever that might be. You think about cigarette smoking, right? Well, I'm not going to judge whether or not that's good or bad, but just as a habit, starts off with one time. Then
I think there's some numbers on whether that's good or bad.
Yeah, well, I'm not judging you.
That's right. We're not judging. We know the answer, but it's no judgment.
Yeah, but okay. Well, and the reason this popped into my head, I just got to say this. I read an article this morning that New Zealand plans to outlaw cigarette smoking in this current generation or something like that. So you think about
outlawed,
that,
huh? Interesting.
Outlaw. Yeah. Think about choices. But we don't want to go down. We stay in leadership because leaders give their team that ability to choose and make choices, right? And I think there's some great points there. As you were describing that selfless versus selfish. How many people look for that promotion in a selfish way? Because you know what comes with that promotion? A little extra cash coming in my bank account, right? So you get excited about that. And then the ones that are successful realize there's more to it than that extra $100 in the bank account. There's a lot more.
That's right.
Sorry, $100. Yeah, right. But still, there's a lot more to it, and they start to realize the ones that are successful, the ones that are true leaders, make that change. And that's a great point of doing it. Like you said, is creating that habit, doing it once, and then doing it again. Heck, take it down even one step further, and put it on your schedule there, new leader who's struggling with a little bit of this, and put that block at 13:30 every day. Send a thank you to somebody on your team and tell them what a good job they're doing. Imagine what that would be like, right? And it becomes a habit. Just think it's so simple. And the irony of this is, as a leader and having led lots of different size organizations in different environments and different cultures and things of that sort, it is so easy as a leader to say thank you or attaboy or good job. Right. You don't have, I love the thank you card story you told earlier. That's great, but you don't always have to sit down and do something profound. It is just go down the hall. You see that guy or gal at the coffee pot. Hey man, that's good stuff. Good stuff. I appreciate what you're doing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I've seen it. I've seen it, in my career, even going back to my special forces days, which, kind of the mantra is just do your freaking job. But you know what? When I would say that to one of the guys, and seasoned, we're talking seasoned,
right.
alpha style leadership and organization. And I tell that guy, damn, that was good stuff, man. Appreciate that. Good work.
You bet.
You can see what it does to them in that attitude.
Yeah, you bet. And Otis, to me, that's what starts to change your emotions and feelings about the thing, is when you see the impact it has, when you express your appreciation to a team member and you see the impact it has on them personally, then you start to feel the feelings and emotions and attitudes, right, of being selfless or being a servant or whatever you're trying to change to. You start to see the impact of them, and then your feelings and emotions then start to change the way you want. And I agree with you. Even these, Marine Corps types, these alpha male types, when you pat one of those guys on the back and say, that was a good job, it makes the world of difference to them. And I always get this, I will get a response like this. Well, they're just doing their job. Do I really need to express my appreciation when they're just doing their job? And my answer to that is, well, do you want them to continue to do their job? And do you want them to do it even better? If the answer to that is yes,
Exactly.
then express your appreciation and they'll continue to do it, and they'll even do it better.
I think the problem there is if you frame it in that sense of they're just doing their job, is it creates a very transactional nature of the relationship to
Yes.
where it's, look, I am paying you X dollars because you are bringing in these outcomes that create this money for my business, and that's it. And when you add the relationship level and the thank yous and all that kind of stuff, you start building onto that, then it helps them to see the bigger picture there. If you're a good leader, then you're talking about vision and purpose and all these type of things. And it helps them to see how they're aligned into that, which, to your point, Michael, then they're going to perform even better because it's no longer that extrinsic motivation of, well, I got a paycheck coming, so I got to do this work. It's now I am a part of this team. I'm doing everything we can to reach that vision together.
Yeah. I mean, just a simple act of appreciation, it improves your relationship. In our leadership equation, it improves your relationship. It also, it ensures that your people understand your motives are selfless also, right? You're not taking credit as the leader for all the success. No, you're giving credit when you're expressing appreciation, all that. So clearly your motives are not about you. They're about the team and about the team member, right? So just that simple act of appreciation, it's going to build better relationships with those team members, and it's going to begin to remove any of those doubts that your team members have about your motives being selfish or not.
So what's next, man? With credible leaders, you've got this really cool formula. I'm proud of you for doing that. I like it. What's going on next? 2022 just around the corner,
Yeah.
and a lot of folks like to use, this time of year to kind of reset the gauge. What's going on with credible leaders next year?
Yeah, so I'm really excited about 2022 coming into the picture here, probably like you guys are, and I know, Otis, you're actually at a client site today, and I'm hoping that in 2022, I will get to do more of that as well. I mean, all of 20, most of 21 has been Zoom conferences and things like that. I'm sure you guys have been the exact same way, but I'm just excited to get face-to-face in some keynote speeches, in some workshops and things like that. So we've got those things lined up for 2022. I'm also diligently working on putting the leadership equation into a book. So I'm hoping that I'll have a publish date some date in 2022, if I can get it all done by then, to get that out there. But besides those activities, we're just continuing to march forward with helping people define leadership, measure leadership, and improve leadership. So we're using our equation to do those three things for anyone and everyone that just feels like they need to improve their leadership.
Oh, that's great, man. I love that you're doing that because, part of my purpose, one of my founding purposes for Driving Purpose and what I do, and that driving me forward, is to create that legacy of great leaders. And I'm glad I got you as part of that broader team that is creating great leaders around the world, because that is how we will make the world better place.
Totally agree.
People care for their team, they do great things for their team, and their teams become great, and they become involved, and that it just expands into everything else that's going on in the community. So great to hear that. Love that we have that parallel effort to just make it better. That sounds really coy, if you will, to make it better, but it's true. I mean, honestly, right? I can hear it, I can see it. And those of you, when you're listening to us on the podcast, I just describe it from the radio land, that excitement, excitement, you see the energy level pick up, and Michael, when he's telling us this, and that's his passion, is to create more great leaders out there. So Michael, man, this has been great. Now we have to do some thinking.
Okay.
Camden, did you learn anything today? What did you learn?
I did. We talk a lot about, power of your mindset, how powerful the mind can be. And, when you touch on the stoicism aspect, your mind is the only thing in your control. I want to talk about the power of pretending. When we were talking about, developing a habit in the service leader example, and then what this made me think of immediately is a show I love, referenced a handful of times because it's got random little philosophy tidbits of BoJack Horseman. And they ask about happiness once, and he goes, well, how do you be happy? And he says, well, I think the trick is just to pretend you're happy. And eventually you stop realizing you're pretending. You forget you're pretending anymore. And I've used that before of, it's like we've talked about before, Dad, on the show, just smile, walk around smiling. It's really hard to be pissed off when you're walking around with a smile. Same type of thing. It's that power of pretending. And you know what? If you're somebody who doesn't have that, servant leadership, it doesn't come naturally to you, pretend. And it'll start coming natural because those endorphins or whatever brain stuff's going on, it's going to start hitting at some point. And, just pretend for a little while, and then it's really going to start hitting.
That's great, Kim. I love that. And, for me, Michael, you were talking about how we always assume our mind is set into this weird thing that we assume the bad. We assume poor intentions from somebody. So just flip that switch, catch yourself, look for those triggers when you're doing that, and it happens. You catch yourself in that thought process and change it and flip it. What would it be like? I talk about one of the things I talk with clients about all the time, road rage. Everybody's had it. I don't care who you are. If you've gotten behind the wheel, you've had some form of road rage. And how do you know that person that cut you off, screwed over your day, wasn't getting to an emergency, wasn't, had a sick kid in the back, had a sick kid at home or whatever? How do you know that? So yeah, it's flipping that switch and having that moment, taking advantage of that moment to be it. Hey, you know what? There's a good chance there's a good reason for that.
I want to add on to that because sorry, I know the connection's not that great today, so there's a little bit of overlap. But one of the things I want to add on to that, when you're talking about like the road rage example of, the human mind wants to tell a story. That was right where we started with that when Michael and I were first bringing up that conversation. The human mind wants to tell a story. So tell a positive one. Your mind, it still scratches that itch that we have to tell stories. So just make it a positive one. We talked about this before of, it's like you want to look for the best in every situation. You want to be able to love all these different people, even if there's a negative thing out there. And it's like, that's really the exercise you're talking about there is it's okay. Instead of going, why is this person such an asshole that cut me off? It's what are the things that they could be doing right now that are so freaking important that I can get cut off and it's okay. I think I made this comment to my wife the other day. She got cut off and she's all mad. And I go, they're curing cancer over there. Calm down. Like it's, they are busy and we need to let them go cure cancer. You never know what they're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally agree with that. Totally agree.
So Michael, what'd you learn?
Well, you know what? I'm going to throw a curveball at you guys. Up until you said something earlier, Otis, just a few minutes ago that really resonated with me. And that, so I'm going to throw this curveball at you. And this, I relearned, I think, in this podcast, the idea of the abundance mindset. You mentioned earlier that, you're excited that I'm out here, and the reality is we're kind of doing the same things. And we may even have the same audience. We may have the same set of clients, and we could easily start to view that in a finite mindset and say, "Oh, well, we're competitors. I can't work with you because you may steal my client from me," and so forth. But I'm of the abundance mindset, and I know you guys are as well. And this idea that I'm excited to collaborate with you guys to be on your podcast. You better believe you guys are going to get invited to my podcast as well. And I just relearned, if you will, the leadership lesson of an abundance mindset, where you want to see the success of your team members, even when it might mean that they're being put in competition with you, right? Are you the type of leader that is of such a generous, abundant mindset that you would be okay if one of your team members got promoted into your position, right? That's the abundant mindset. And as you were talking about that earlier, Otis, of, it just kind of brought that back to mind of, yeah, the abundance mindset is so powerful in what we're doing as business owners, but also in leadership.
Yeah, that's great. I love that you brought that up. Yeah, I just like to say, I can always go buy more apples. I can always, find another orchard where there's more apples. And you know what? If I run out of orchards, I can go plant some apple trees, right? Because there's
That's right.
always more apple pie. Let me just tell you.
That's right. That's right.
Michael, how can folks get in touch with you, follow you, connect with you, learn more?
Yeah, the best place to start, Otis, is in our website, credibleleaders.com. You can certainly go there. You'll see what we call the leadership calculator. You can take an assessment. It utilizes the leadership equation underneath the hood, and it gives you that leadership score, and then tells you what you can do to improve those 4 variables so that you can increase and improve your leadership score. It's a free tool that's out there. So head over to credibleleaders.com and you can find that. And then social media wise, I'm pretty much on all of them. LinkedIn is definitely the one I'm there the most. So just look me up on LinkedIn or any of the other socials as well. I'd be happy to connect with you there.
Awesome. Appreciate that, man. Good having you on the show. Really a lot of fun, some great points about leadership, and I love that. I got to give a shout out to my client who allowed me to steal some space in their office today, and Atlas Advisors here in Columbus, Ohio. You know what? If you have a need for linguists worldwide, give them a shout. Just look them up at Atlas Advisors. You'll find them. You'll find them just about everywhere, and they're doing some great stuff around the world, helping people communicate better. So, Camden, run us out.
All right. Thank you all for listening to today's show. Special thanks to our guest, Michael Tannen, for joining us today, and our sponsor, Tribe and Purpose. Find your tribe, find your purpose. You can learn more about Tribe and Purpose at findyourpurpose.coach. You can check out recent episodes of the Cam Otis Show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts, and check out a full archive at thecamootisshow.buzzsprout.com. The Cam Otis Show is on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Thanks again. We'll see y'all next week.